5, she often had problems sleeping at night. Well, guess what she did? Okay, it's the middle of the night, and I'm wide awake, I'm going to pray. And so us kids often got prayed for in the middle of the night, along with many other times. And you know, what an incredible blessing to have had a mom who was a prayer warrior. And I'm just thankful that I can see people in this crowd who are going to appreciate that, because you've come to be prayer warriors yourselves over the years. Very thankful for that. Another thing, and this, I picked a verse out of James also with this one. Mom was a good listener. Mom was a good listener. In James 1:19, James writes, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And Mom had that down pretty well. She did. I want to read something that just kind of exemplifies the fact that other people were aware of this. This actually comes from an old neighbor that we grew up with next door for many, many years, the Wittenborns, and we often played together as neighbors growing up. And this is from Jack Wittenborn. Jack is the oldest, right? Yeah, okay, I did remember that, right? Jack wrote, he said, "Bessie was the other mom, the one I always counted on to listen and not judge me. She always supported me, and I have always thought about her and the family." That's a pretty neat testimony from a neighbor kid. In the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, and I wish that the church at large taught that more than it actually does, but in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, it actually exhorts us saying, "Let your words be few." Nowadays, everybody thinks they have to talk a ton just to be recognized and acclaimed or whatever, but actually the Word of God does say, "Let your words be few." Well, you know what? Partly with Mom's example and partly with what I've been learning myself over the years with my own relationship with the Lord, I'm becoming a man who talks less and prays more. And so I'm thankful, again, for the example of Mom in being a good listener. I'm going to jump back just a couple pages. In Hebrews 3:13, it says, "But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." Well, the last thing I want to share is that Mom was an encourager. And I love the theme of encouragement myself. I've written hundreds, if not thousands, of messages, articles, devotional things, and that kind of thing. But if I ever decide to write a book one of these days, I think it's going to be on the theme of encouragement, because it's needed, but it's also often lacking. And so I'm thankful that Mom was an encourager, and she was my encourager growing up. And even before Dr. Chapman's 5 love languages became famous, she and her mom had one of those love languages down very well. That's called words of affirmation. And I appreciated that so very much. And I've got a couple of little things that I'm going to read from a couple of my kids that speak well to this point. This is from my son, who was out here earlier in the week for the graveside service, but had to get back to New England just the other day. He wrote this: "I'll never forget when we would arrive at Grandma Bessie's house. When we turned onto her street, I'd have my hand on the car door's latch." And you got to remember, we only were back about every 3 years. "Before the van would come to a complete stop, I'd open the door, outrun my sisters to the door, to get one of the greatest gifts ever, a hug from Grandma Bessie. As kids, she would take us to the store, let us pick whatever we wanted, something parents didn't let you do. She made these little magic snacks with cornflakes, corn syrup, peanut butter, and other highly addictive secret ingredients. I swear it was manna from heaven. She never forgot a birthday, anniversary, or important date that mattered to us." Sorry, I lost my place. "But by far, some of my favorite memories were sitting with Grandma as she reminded me of how much she loved us, how special we were, and how Jesus had great plans to do great things both in and through each of us. She had a way of bringing life to others by the way she lived her life and deeply loved others. She was clearly a life giver. When I think of Grandma, John 10 comes to mind when Jesus says, 'I've come that you may have life and life to the full.' My prayer is we will all be life givers. We love you, Grandma, and you will be missed by all." And then another thought, this is from my youngest daughter, Elisa. She wrote, "Last week I lost my grandmother, and it signified the end of another season as she was my last living grandparent. She was an amazing woman, even if she may not have realized that herself. She was one of the most prayerful people I know, and after my mom and sister, the woman I felt most loved and cherished by. She also reminded me how special I was to her and never hesitated to tell me she was proud of me. On the phone, she not only reminded me how much she loved me, but also say, 'Be good to yourself, sweetie.' I'll miss that. Her hugs were also the best. I wish my kids could have spent more time with her. When I think of Mother Teresa's quote, 'We can do no great things, only small things with great love,' my grandma is the person that comes to mind." Each passing year, I try to be more of an encourager to people. And I just see what a blessing it is to them. And so, thanks, Mom, for setting the example of being an encourager. And thanks to you guys for listening.
I was given the task of joy of getting to be the person who reminds us of some of the things that we remember about Mom, especially through the years, maybe as kids and maybe along the way, of the things that she did that were unique maybe to families, but maybe not. She was a lady in her own right, but she also enjoyed life. We look back on some of the things that we enjoyed, and I still remember Mom, when we'd get the water guns out, those little pistols, you'd squirt like this, and you just didn't have enough water in them. Well, Mom was one of those ones, she thoroughly enjoyed getting in the middle of it. And so she would turn on a hose on one end of the house, and we'd turn on a hose at the other end of the house, and we'd drag him around. And I'm thinking, what other mother would stand there with the hose just blasting in her face, and she's blasting it right back at you? And you just smile and laugh and go on. She was one who loved so many things along the way. She loved the trips to the ocean that they would take and journey along the way. Going up the Mackenzie River, having a chance to go up to the hatchery at Leeburg and feed the fish, or put a pole out in the water, even if you didn't catch something. It was just being there along the way. She was the one that gave our family a lot of the joy as we were traveling along, and teaching us to enjoy the sights along the way. Seeing deer or a heron or baby animals along the way. She just loved nature. When we set out some things out there, we started looking through things, and I'm going, well, she could probably tell you, because she loved birds, and she had bird feeders out, and then the bird book has lots of these markers in them. So if you had to ask somebody about a bird, she could probably say, oh, well, that's what that is. And so she passed some of that on to us. She loved word searches, to be able to find words within a puzzle along the way. For many, many years, she was an avid reader, and she loved to read many different things along with her Bible. One of the things that I always remember is that through the years of my preaching, she would always ask me, well, what are you preaching on this next Sunday? And then she would say, what passage are you from? And then she'd be reading it, and then she'd ask sometime later, well, how did it go? And you're going, well, I don't know. You wondered. She had many things that she collected over the years. She collected bells, she collected little lambs in her things. I think one of the greatest things she collected was friends. Sometimes we forget that it's not just objects, it's people along the way. She would be one that would journal throughout her lifetime in many different ways. We found tablets and different books, whatever it was she found to write on. She would write notes, and she'd write remembrances of trips and people along the way. We even found a little book that's called Golden West Notes, and it's back in 62 and 64 when they took a trip, and she would even put in here where they stopped, what they ate, and how much it cost. Mom was a connoisseur of food. If you knew her through the years, she had certain things she liked, and then otherwise she would say, well, how was that? Well, it was sort of but she loved to take those trips and those journeys with us along the way. She loved to bake. You're going to see some cookies and things out here that some of them were family recipes that were passed on, and we enjoyed them, and so we wanted to share some of those with you. One of the things that she was especially was a person who loved to joke and tease with people. And we had that banter. We still have that banter back and forth between us. You might hear us and it sounds like we're picking on each other. Well, we are, but we aren't. But she would bring the joy and just of that back and forth. As my sister says, she trusted us in that generation that we grew up in, that she let you go wherever you needed to go as long as you were within yelling distance to come home. Some of us remember riding bicycles off to a distant place, and it was a time of trust that you could do that. She would take and especially love grandkids as they came along, and the special memories, as even was spoken of, with each one in their own unique way. She was busy with her hands. She liked to do needlework and crocheting, and she made a number of trivets for hot pads. But one of the things she made for many years were stockings, and I don't think we found any to put out in the process. But she made stocking caps, and they were given to ones in need in different places. In fact, I think some were seal-a-mealed and put together and sent over to Africa, as Karen had told me. One of the things that Rod mentioned was that she was a prayer warrior. And those little Post-it notes that are just here and there, well, if you had your name written on it, it meant that you were getting prayed for along the way. She was that type of person. Not only did she pray for you, but she was one who would, again, write those cards or those letters, those anniversary ones. The grandkids always knew that they would, for many years until her health failed at a certain point, would get a card, maybe with a little cash in it. But the note was the most important thing. And then, especially, we look and we think about another thing that she loved and encouraged, and that's one of the reasons we put it in your little folder, is she loved the fact that kids could go to camp. And that's one of the things we put in there for a memorial, is that, as Karen said, she would take and sacrifice. Our family was not rich, but we were rich in love and care for people. And to get the kids to go to camp, especially us, was one of the great loves that she had. And so those are some of the things that we remember, we think about along the way. After Karen shares some thoughts, we're going to give a few of you a few brief moments